Hooton of Citizens Climate Lobby, and also I'm a board member at Go Electric Colorado. Very briefly, Go Electric Colorado is a group of volunteers focused in Colorado, helping people on the journey from fossil fuels to all electric appliances. So we've got a couple of our true experts that are going to be joining with me today, David Penscover and Stuart Cummings, and they are what we call electrification coaches. So they answer people's questions about, because there's a lot of technical details in converting your home from gas furnaces and boilers onto heat pumps and hot water heaters and things like that. So they help people feel comfortable about going down that path. And so that's what our group is set up to do. So today I'm gonna speak very briefly because we really want to make this a time for you to ask your questions. There's so many details into this process, and I want to take advantage of these experts, but I'm going to give you a very basic journey that that many homeowners follow, and then turn it over to your questions. So please be thinking of things you want to ask David and Stuart as we go through. So first, I'm going to talk about why electrification very briefly, and then what your typical projects might be, depending on your specific needs, and then turn it over for questions. So first of all, you know, at CCL, we know that electrification is one of our top priorities. And one of the reasons why we think that that's such a big part of what we ought to be doing individually is because a third of our carbon footprint as individuals is what we consume in our homes, between heating and cooling and all the other electric appliances in our home. So if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, of course, you can get an EV, you can move off of meat and onto more vegetables and things like that. You can buy more sustainable products, but a big impact that you can have is by electrifying your home. And among the things in your home, space heating and cooling is actually 57% of your carbon footprint. So if you're going to do one thing, it's to focus on space heating and cooling. You know, years ago, I put in solar on my roof thinking, okay, well, that's a great thing to do. It didn't even occur to me. In fact, at that point, I don't think I even knew what kind of heat I had. I have a natural gas heater, and I'll explain my journey here in a second. But what I should have been prioritizing back then is replacing my gas furnace with a heat pump. In fact, just today, I selected my vendor for that process. And so that is now underway. They're ordering the equipment as we speak. But as you can see, 57% is space heating and cooling. And so if you're going to start on that journey, the very first thing you typically want to do is make sure that the environment of your home, the building envelope, is tight. Heat pumps are very efficient, but they're even more efficient if you don't have leaks in your home. So you want to pull in an expert, and I'll give you some resources on how you can find those experts, who will do what's called an energy audit that includes typically a blower door test. Where they're going to do is use pressure to identify where you have leaks in your home, and then identify if you maybe need to beef up your insulation or provide caulking around door jambs, or replace some of the windows, things like that. Because you want to have a very efficient home as a very first thing. And there's a very immediate payback to doing these kind of projects. And there's money available to do that. So the Inflation Reduction Act includes a credit of $150 for doing the audit initially, and then up to $1,200 for doing any insulation and other weatherization work that you want. So that is typically a very first place that you want to start. Even if you're not ready to replace your furnace, you can make sure that your home is very tight, and that'll still save you energy. And you'll see that almost immediately on your energy bill. So after you've done that, then typically, so just how do you find an auditor? Turns out this is not always as easy as you'd think, especially in the more rural areas. But here's a couple of resources. and I'll share the slides with anybody who wants. The Building Performance Institute is an accreditation for these types of folks. So you can go to their website. Excel Energy has a list of resources if you're serviced by Excel, and I know not everybody on the call is. And then in the mountain communities, there's Energy Smart Colorado, and they have a list of resources. So, and then there's a couple others. So there are places, if you're kind of wondering where do I get started, you can go to one of these websites, and they will point you to an accredited energy auditor who can help you get started on your journey. And like I said, I'll share these slides. So after you've insulated your home, you've gotten going on the weatherization project, then most likely what you're going to want to do, depending on the age of your existing infrastructure, is to start to replace it with a heat pump. And these things, you know, your gas furnace probably lasts around 15 to 20 years. So if it's about 15 years old or so, it's a good time to start looking into replacement. Because what you don't want to have to do is replace it in an emergency. You want to be able to be more deliberate about doing this. But so very briefly, what is a heat pump? What's its magic? First of all, you already have a couple in your home. Your refrigerator is a heat pump. It pulls the heat out of the ice box and pushes it out into the rest of your room. Your air conditioner is a heat pump. It just pulls heat out of your house and pushes it outside. The difference is an air conditioner is only one way. So all a heat pump is a two-way mover of heat. Even in the winter, even at 15, 20 below, it finds heat outside and pushes it into the house very efficiently. In fact, 3 to 5 times more efficiently than burning fossil fuels. And, you know, we could get into the physics later about how it works, but just know that it works incredibly well in all climates, including in Colorado, in Maine, and in very cold environments. So that's what a heat pump is. You see those boxes, you put one of those outside, and then depending on the rest of your home, there's 2 different types typically that go inside your house. So if you have existing ducts, then your air handler will go typically in the basement and then connect to your existing ductwork. If you don't have ducts, then you're going to get what's called a mini split, which is a little box that you see kind of like this. And if you've ever been to a motel or most hotels, that's kind of it looks like just the heating devices that you see in a motel. So depending on your house, you'll either connect into your existing ductwork, or they'll pop holes in your walls and replace and put the air handler there, typically up high, so that the heat for the air conditioning to flow. So those are the 2 types. I'm talking typically about an air source heat pump. If somebody has questions, we can talk about geothermal later. But more accessible and typically cheaper is to go with called an air source heat pump, where it pulls the heat out of the air and pushes it into your house. A couple of key questions, and I know this is very small, but I'm just going to explain. One of the very first things you want to do when you call a contractor to get them to look at this and give you an estimate is ask them what % of their heating systems that they install are actually heat pumps. There's a huge divergence in the industry. A lot of these contractors have been around for a good long time, and they're very used to putting in natural gas furnaces, and some of them have a lot less expertise in heat pumps. So you want to find somebody who has the right level expertise. Typically, that means they've been certified by some of the key manufacturers, like Mitsubishi, like Bosch, like Daikin. There's a handful of brands, and you want somebody who's been certified by one of those large heat pump manufacturers. So ask them what their experience is, what brands do they represent, things like that. Another key question, and this one gets a little technical, but you want to ask them if they're going to do a heat load calculation, and it's called a manual J. So if you want to really impress them with your knowledge, you throw out the term manual J. And what that does is help a smart contractor determine what size of heat pump to put in. Bigger is not better. What you want is just the right size for your home, because these things work on a variable speed, or you don't want it turning off and turning on. You want it to be more or less on all the time, but at a slow, steady pace, so that it's always keeping your home at a very constant temperature that, you know, suits your needs. And that happens most efficiently. You'll save the most money. You won't overpay for your heat pump if your contractor does the right thing in sizing it, and that means to do a heat load calculation, that manual J calculation. There's a lot of other questions you might ask, but I think those are the key ones to ask. And again, I'll share these slides with you to help you be prompted as you're talking to contractors. I got 4 bids. They were very different, 2 different manufacturers and pretty different prices. And the prices were largely about the heat load calculation. So I had Stuart help me, and we picked one of the smaller size units for my home because that guy did the right manual J calculation, and that's going to save me some money. So after you've got now just fantastic heat inside your house because you've replaced your heat pump, then the next thing you can look at is installing a heat pump hot water heater. So these work exactly the same way. They don't heat water by boiling it like a natural gas furnace does. They pull heat out of the air and then use that heat to heat the water that then heats your showers and your dishwasher and your sink. So again, incredibly efficient equipment, 3 to 4. In fact, Stuart, I think, told me his is 10 times more efficient than what he had before. Maybe that was Dave, one of these guys. But so incredibly efficient because, again, they're moving heat, not creating heat. And water heaters typically last less time than a furnace. So these things last around 10 years. So that's about when you want to start looking at replacing your existing heat pump, your existing hot water heater. And if you're not sure how old it is, here's another little trick. The model number on the device, if you go down in your basement and you pull up the model number, buried in that number is going to be the year that it was installed, if it's not actually written on your furnace or written on your hot water heater. So then you can take that number, what I did, and go online and just search on that number, and it told me how old the thing was, because I just had no idea. I bought the house in 2013. I knew we hadn't put one in, but I didn't know how old it was. So the numbers themselves have intelligence in them about how old the device is. If you put one of these in, you're going to save a few $100s a year on your utilities. And there are also, just like for the heat pump, for these hot water heaters, there are credits available up to $2,000 from the feds. That's under the Inflation Reduction Act. And then more money from state of Colorado, from Excel, if you're in that territory, from some counties, and from some cities, depending on where you live. One thing you will have to figure out is if you have the room on your electrical panel for this. So that's one of the things those experts will help you with. These do require typically 240 volts. Some smaller ones are 120. Those are available and becoming more and more available, but most of them are around 240. Then after you've done those 3 things, weatherize, heat pumps, and hot water heaters, then there's a whole host of other projects that you can start to take on, typically less financially involved, but also less impactful on your carbon footprint. An induction stove is just a miracle of fast heating and getting beautiful for getting methane out of your house, so your air quality will improve. Obviously, putting on solar can save you a lot on your electric bill. I actually get a check back every month from Excel, so I love that. I'm a net producer. If you haven't already, just switching off of incandescent to LED bulbs, getting rid of your lawnmower, and actually an electric grill cooks up so much faster, and again, less polluting than a propane or a natural gas grill. So those are just some of the other projects that you can take on your journey to become purely electric. Here's a slide that just talks about the incentives. Fundamentally, you get $2,000 for a heat pump or a heat pump water heater. That's each. And if you're going to put in solar or a battery, you get 30% with really no cap. So there's a lot of money that's available. For mid and low income people, there will be rebates available. They are not available today. That's been slow to roll out under the Inflation Reduction Act, but supposedly that is coming this fall. So you can begin your journey now knowing that that money will soon be available. And I believe that's supposed to be available at the point of purchase. So when you're working with your contractor, when rebates become available, that's something else you can ask them, is if they will help you with that process. A couple of resources that I'm going to talk to, and then I'm going to turn it over to the guys. So first of all, you can get details about this electrification journey by going to rewiringamerica.org. They've got what they call a personal electrification planner with just great details about the things that I've described to you today, pros and cons, links to other resources, things like that. So that's a great place to start. And then also on our website, and we are continuing to enhance our website, but we've leveraged Rewiring America and put on a Colorado-specific savings calculator. So if you go right on our homepage, which is goelectriccolorado.org, you'll see right in the middle of the page a calculator that shows you all of the credits that are available to you. The Fed, the state, city, and county, depending on where you live, you put in your zip code. It'll tell you all the things that are available to help you save money on the process. And, if you pick the right contractor, they're going to help you with that journey too. So there you go. It was a crash course because I really wanted to focus on having you all ask your questions that are tailored to your specific needs. But there's the journey: seal your home, install a heat pump hot water heater, and then other fun stuff. So with that, I'll end the slideshow and see what questions you all have. So Stuart, while you're thinking of your question, Stuart is one of the founders of our organization, a retired airline pilot who went through the process of electrifying his home, figured out how complicated it all was, and thought, wow, I've learned all this good stuff. I ought to share it with other people. And that was the genesis of creating Go Electric Colorado. Then he found another smart guy named Dave Penskover, who's an architect. And Dave's also gone down that journey. In fact, we just had a terrific ribbon cutting ceremony at Dave's house to celebrate his electrification journey that we got some good press out of. CCL was a sponsor of that with Rewiring America. We had the EPA administrator for the Mountain States there. We had a couple of the state senator, state rep, a couple other good folks. So,
Mayor of Boulder, Aaron Brockett. Yeah.
Boulder. Yeah. So who has a question for our experts? Or who has gone down the journey and what have you all learned that you think you'd like to share with everybody else?
Well, there is a question in the chat. There are a couple questions in the chat, I think. And one, Jim, is about, and colleagues, is about electric, let's see,
Grills.
electric grills, and whether are there any that you really like or that think are, maybe certain types that you really like.
I have a Weber electric grill. It was pretty cheap. It's portable, it's like, I don't know, it's not that big. I can pick it up and move it around, and it heats up to 1500 degrees or something like that in no time. So like I get beautiful charbroiled steaks on the thing, and I don't have a big tank to lug around or to go replenish, every few months. So that one I really liked. I'll find a link to it.
Looks like Rob Robinson raised his hand, maybe, and
Rob, you're on mute.
Okay. So in my house, I've got a gas-fired boiler that heats both our domestic water, but also our home heating. And we have baseboard radiators. And I was thinking about trying to replace that gas boiler. And I was looking around for what incentives there might be for doing that. I couldn't find any. And I wonder if the experts, those of you with experience, have any suggestions.
sorry if I missed it, Rob. Where are you located?
I'm in Wheat Ridge.
Okay. Excel Energy territory.
Yes.
Yep. Stu can talk to it some more. So there's air-to-air heat pumps, which would replace a furnace. There are air-to-water heat pumps, which can replace a boiler. Arctic is a brand that makes them. They are kind of on the expensive side. They've been using them in Europe for maybe a decade now. Like I said, Stu can talk more to that. But they are, I would say in the next few years, the cost will be coming down and there'll be more options. During our consults at Go Electric Colorado, when a home has a boiler, a lot of times we might recommend a mini split system, which Stu's home has several mini split heads, and then you could keep your boiler as a backup. I'll let Stu talk, but how old is your boiler?
It was installed in around 2000, so it's 24
Okay.
years old.
Explain how it would work with using the furnace as a backup.
Pardon me?
I'm suggesting to Dave, explain how it would work with the furnace being a backup.
Yeah, if you did a mini split, obviously you don't have any duct work, so you can't put in a heat pump with an air handler to, force the heating and cooling through the ductwork. But a mini split system is similar to what Stu has at his home in South Boulder. Each room or, the living room or the master bedroom would have a mini split head. And that would do the majority of your heating and cooling. It's kind of nice. It gives you different zones of the house. But that boiler, I guess to answer Jim's question, could be there to supplement the heating. Of course, you still use that for domestic hot water as well. Stu, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was told that to replace the boiler with a heat pump to heat the water, that heat pumps can't get up to the temperature that's required for the baseboard heaters. They said you need to get the water temperature up to about 180 degrees, whereas a heat pump maximum is about 120 degrees.
Yeah, that's true with your current system because you have the typical low efficiency American baseboard radiators. So and current air to water heat systems can sustain 120. So what you would have to do, this is really unthinkable, I think, but you would have to actually swap out all the radiators in your house for high efficiency, European type models, and then your air to water heater would actually have to do a separate loop to each one. So that would require a tremendous amount of demolition, and it's just not a practical option. There are high temperature models coming. What would work really well for you? Like Dave said, you have a couple of options. You could do a modification to your air to water system. You could modify some of the radiators, and you could get what's called, there's a couple of manufacturers. There's Chiltrix, Enertech. There's a few others. They're called monoblock systems. So you have one big inverter or compressor outside. It looks like a heat pump on steroids, and it can do three things. It can do air to water. It can do air to domestic hot water. It can also even drive a forced air system, which you don't have. So you would only be using two of the three functions in this monoblock system, but you would have to modify your radiators. If you could, like Dave said, a mini split system or a ductless system might be an excellent choice. And then you could just retain the entire boiler system as is, just leave it untouched as a backup system. And so you would have a backup system for a while. But mini splits, the great advantage of mini splits is that they're the most effective air-to-air system, and they give you precision temperature control in each room. They would give you the gentle heat that you're probably used to. They would replicate that.
And in case some people are wondering what a mini split or a ductless heat pump is, when you go to a hotel, it's the unit that's on the wall, right? And above the bed, and you turn it on. They do heating and cooling. Of course, the ones we would put in our homes would be much more efficient than the ones that the hotels may be doing. But that would be a ductless system that you could do for heating and cooling in your home.
And all those credits that I mentioned earlier would be available to you, Rob, if you purchased one of those.
The mini splits are taking air out of the room, so I guess the humidity stays the same. One of the problems that we've had in the past is that a typical furnace with ducts dries out the atmosphere in the house quite significantly. Is that a problem with the mini splits?
No, that's a great question. So your furnace, I think your furnace is it's not a condensing furnace. Is that correct? Is it basically breathing air inside the house?
It's a boiler.
It's a boiler. Okay. Yeah, so you're consuming air in the house. So that's going, I grew up with oil furnace in Boston. So that will definitely dehumidify the air. You'll find mini splits are really gentle because they're in the wintertime, they're not dehumidifying the air. They're simply raising the temperature. So you could just add a moderate amount of humidity with a floor model humidifier, for example. And for example, we have 2,100 square feet in our house, and we humidify the entire house with one small Vornado floor humidifier set on low. It's meant for one room, but it does our entire house because we have a really tight envelope. So the heat pump, the heat from the mini splits is going to be far gentler. They're incredibly quiet. They're not like I think the hotel air conditioning units have been referenced a couple of times. Those usually sound like freight trains. These things are largely silent. And they also embody some pretty impressive artificial intelligence. For example, my Panasonic just above my head, it can look out 23 feet. It has infrared sensing. It's tuned to the human body's infrared signature, knows when you're in the room, knows when you're not in the room, adjusts temperature accordingly. It also constantly scans the room for cold spots. And it can modulate its louvers, and so it eliminates cold pooling on the floor. If it's installed in a basement, for example, it'll eliminate that problem of having a really cold floor. The first couple of feet of air above the floor being cold, it'll eliminate things like that.
That's a good point, Stu. I'll just throw in, they're extremely quiet, unlike a hotel one. But and you have a couple in your home, Stu, I believe, ceiling mounted. You don't have to do a wall mounted. If there's attic access, you could do a ceiling grill. Right. That would be one of the heads to heat and cool a room.
Yeah, they come in about 4 basic flavors. Like Dave said, they come with the wall type that you usually see in literature. They come with ceiling cassettes. Like Dave said, if you have room in your attic, I have two in my upper floor. They're big 50-pound boxes. They're suspended from the ceiling and they're just flush with the ceiling. They look pretty slick. You can get a floor mount model that looks like a high-tech radiator. You know, if you want something on the floor, they're flush to the wall. They're only a few inches deep and they stand on the floor and they're about a couple of 2.5 feet tall. They're basically floor registers that are vertical. And then there's one other type called a ducted mini split. It's basically a miniaturized air handler, a forced air system that goes up in the ceiling and can do a couple of rooms. It can do two, sometimes more rooms. So it's essentially a small ductwork network that your installer would build up in the attic. And then there'd be like an air handler, a mini air handler up there. And that could duct air down into a couple of rooms. It's a little bit more difficult and expensive to install, but that is an option if you don't want to see anything except just air grills, coming out of your attic ceiling, for example.
Let's go on to a couple other questioners. Phil, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was curious. Most of the time whenever I look at heat pumps, the example that's always shown is Mitsubishi. So my question is, what other types are there? I saw a different brand on the Jim's slideshow. And I also know, related to that question, is that about a year or so ago, the DOE started a kind of a competition to come up with better and improved heat pumps. And I wonder if that effort by the Department of Energy has borne fruit in the market of available heat pumps.
Go ahead, Dave. You want to throw out some names, or I can start?
Oh, go ahead, Stu.
So yeah, the Mitsubishi Hyperheat is still the standard. Just for a number of reasons. One, it runs about twice the pressure of a normal heat pump, about 600 versus 300 PSI, has better modulation, has great performance well below 0 Fahrenheit. There's Carrier Infinity series has improved a lot. Doesn't quite match the Hyperheat when you get down to 0 Fahrenheit, which is roughly our design temperature here in Boulder or below. There's nothing radical as far as the legacy builders have come out of that testing, that series of tests you were talking about. The other place I encourage people to look are the Chinese brands. There's a whole suite of them. There's Mr. Cool, used to be Medea, used to be a Spanish company. That's a DIY, do it yourself. I think they're rated to at least -22 to -30 Fahrenheit. There's Gree, High-Ear, ASIC. A lot of these are you can buy online, like at hvacdirect.com. You just have to have a willing installer that's willing to work with that equipment. We are taking a Rewiring America coaching course right now, and one of the gentlemen up in the mountain country just installed Gree. So this is an analog to the Chinese EV industry that's making at or near, state-of-the-art cars. We're just not letting them in. We're putting 100% tariffs on them. Nobody's familiar with them, but they're going to put Detroit out of business here one of these days. There's a direct analog to the Chinese HVAC industry. They make the vast majority of heat pumps. They're deployed all over Asia and Europe. It's just we don't see them here in the United States because we have the legacy issue. But that is another option to consider, and they're far, far less costly. Probably not quite as well built as Mitsubishi and Daikin. Those are two Japanese brands that tend to be the standard. Daikin, D-I-A-K, I think K-E-N-I-N is another brand to consider. I think their specs are virtually match Mitsubishi, very long warranties. But you can find Gree heat pumps that are they're rated down to -30 Fahrenheit, roughly half the cost. And the warranty is, it's like 12 years, just like Mitsubishi. So there's stuff out there. It's just coming from faraway places.
Yeah, Mitsubishi was kind of the pioneer for cold climate to really do, adequate heating at these lower temperatures. But it's exciting. Like Stu said, there's a bunch of brands that are catching up.
If you're looking for a contractor, you can go to the websites of those companies, and then they'll show you all the accredited, trained contractors in your area. Because you want good service. You want somebody who knows what they're doing. I saw Ryan had a question.
Yeah, hi. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Um, yeah, I've been working on my electrification plan. I'm trying to get a quote for some pre-wiring right now. Um, I our heat pump, we have a heat pump, but it's I don't know, probably 17 years old with the furnace backup. So I'm hoping to at some point replace that with a cold climate heat pump and replace the furnace. The other thing is the water heater. Our water heater was replaced, I think, in 21. It's gas. I'd like to get a cold or a heat pump water heater, but would it be worth it to install it when the gas water heater is only 5-6 years old?
If you want to,
I'll-
yeah,
I'll
okay,
let-
I'll say something about that. Yeah, my gas hot water heater was only about 2 years old, and I couldn't wait to get a heat pump hot water heater in. So I put it on Craigslist for some really low amount, and I had 3 property managers in my driveway the next day. So Craig, for new or like new or decent condition equipment, the community sales sites like Craigslist are a great place to get rid of equipment and recoup some of your money.
Okay.
And then, like I said, in fact, here, I want to share my screen here. This is, just so you know, I'm not lying. Let's see, can everybody,
So
We
I
do
haven't
this
replaced
thing.
my water heater yet. Stu has a heat pump water heater, and it's hard to remove a piece of equipment that's still working, but Stu would say the energy savings are definitely there.
here you go. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so take a look at the vertical axis. That's in kilowatt hours. That's ridiculous. 38, and I'm kind of averaging, you can see that's 38 kilowatt hours per month roughly, and then lower. In the wintertime, it actually goes up a little bit more because we add some supplemental heat sometimes to experiment, but basically 38 kilowatt hours. One therm is 29.3 kilowatt hours. So you can see I'm using about 1.3, 1.4 therms, equivalent of natural gas. And I've got a teenager in the house. I hand wash dishes several times a day. We don't hold back on the whole water. That's like, I call that free hot water. So maybe that'll help you change your mind. And we've been taking data on this heat pump for 5 years. It just comes in like this every year.
So Stu, you said about one point something therms now, but on your old water heater, you were using what, 6 or 7 therms?
No, on a conventional gas hot water heater for a family like us, we'd be using anywhere from 12 to 15 therms.
Hmm.
Yeah, the last consult I had, family of 3, they were using 13 therms per month.
So you can look at your Excel energy or your utility bill, and obviously in the summer, you may still have gas cooking, but that's very minimal. But in the summer, you can see how many therms of gas they're charging you, and that's basically your domestic hot water usage. In the winter, obviously, your gas furnace is going, so the therms would be quite a bit more, but you can kind of break those apart to see how many therms your water heater is using.
Okay. I have a 150 amp breaker or service. I'm trying to not have to upgrade the main panel to 200 amps. How efficient would a 120 volt heat pump water heater run?
Well, Stu, go ahead. Like I would say, we talk about this all the time. You could probably even do a 240 heat pump water heater on that panel, with no problems.
Yeah, easy. 150 is a ton of room. You don't have to upgrade. Just have to be smart where you're putting stuff. I mean, you don't have anything. Do you have a hot tub or anything like that? Or do you have
No
anything?
hot tub, but I'm installing an EV charger. I have a gas dryer in the basement that I'd like to change to electric. So there'll be basically 2 dryers, the heat pump, the EV charger, the stove is electric. So I'm working on getting a couple other quotes for the electrical work I want to have done. I'm concerned with what we do have now to add 3 more 240 volt circuits, one for the EV charger, one for the dryer, and one for the heat pump water heater.
There are definitely lower cost options. You should schedule a free consult with Go Electric Colorado, and we can talk through it in detail. But yeah, a panel upgrade from 150 amps to 200 amps could cost $4,000 or $5,000, and a lot of times they're not necessary. Stu can chime in, but as you add an EV, as you go to an electric dryer, there's lower cost options to maybe share a circuit. So if your EV is charging, it's a smart circuit. And then when you turn on your dryer, it knows to ramp down your electric vehicle charging while that dryer is going. And then when that dryer goes off, then your EV ramps back up. And, that's a few $100s potentially for a smart circuit, as opposed
Yeah,
to
that's
a
at
panel
the Neo
upgrade.
charge.
Yeah, we would normally, in fact, initially, we would normally try to keep you within the bounds of a 100 amp panel. The vast majority of Americans, even with everything running, never even get near 100 amp actual usage. A really good example is your EV. Unless you have to drive a truck every day a lot and you have to fill up a really giant battery every night, you can charge at pretty low amperage. So even though a standard level 2, for example, is 40 amps, which equates to a 32 amp charging rate, you don't need that much. I mean, I have 2 of those in my house, and I generally charge at 20 amp charging rate or less. So all of these devices, even though they have a rating, the actual use of them is often far lower than their full rating, and that includes like your induction stove. If you're really worried about it, you can look at a heat pump washer dryer. A combination. It's a washer and a dryer. It's ductless. It's a heat pump. They're kind of pricey, but you could take a look at that. Otherwise, 150 amps should be more than enough to electrify your house. More than enough. You'll still have some margin left.
Okay.
And that chart that Stu showed, that's an Emporia energy monitor. There's several energy monitor options where for a few $100s, you can install these in your homes, and you can see like, oh yeah, my home's never pulling more than 80 or 90 amps, or so you can kind of keep an eye on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I do have Emporia installed in my house.
Oh, great.
Oh, great. Good. That's really excellent. Yeah. In fact, you'll find like a heat pump hot water heater, my Ream, it's 240, but it's just 15 amps single pole. And when it's running, it's just pulling 350 watts. That's like 3 light bulbs back in the day. So, it may have a 15 amp rating, but it's just pulling a fraction of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really quick on the 120 volt heat pump water heaters. They're starting to get installed more. Stu, have you had some consults on that? I guess, we recommend them maybe for smaller apartments or condos, or maybe 2 occupants in the household.
Yeah, no, we don't have much data on them yet as far as reliability. I mean, we're kind of in the same boat that y'all are in. We're just going to have to watch data come in and collect numbers. The reason why you get away with that, because the vast majority of the time, hopefully all of the time, if the heat pump is running in heat pump mode, it's just pulling anywhere from 250 to 350 watts. That's obviously easily done on 120 volts. The 240 comes in when you're running the 2 backup coils, because a heat pump hot water heater is basically a standard electric water tank with their upper and lower heating elements, high wattage, like 25 to 3,500 watts, with a compact state-of-the-art heat pumps bolted to the top of it. The vast majority of the tank should just be running with a few hundred watts. If it has to catch up or recover from successive use, then it can fire up one or more of the heating elements, and that's when the consumption goes way up. Obviously, with a 120 unit, those resistance heaters aren't going to be able to pull as much amperage as a 240 unit. There's better ways to skin that cat, and you can put a mixing valve. In fact, I think that's code in Denver. Should or will soon be code out here in Boulder. Just put a mixing valve in the tank. That's another $200 to $250 from your plumber, and that way you can increase the temperature of the tank from the normal 122. That's what our tank is, up all the way up to like 145. increases the energy density of the tank. You can basically turn a 50-gallon tank into almost an 80-gallon tank that way. And then the mixing valve will meter it down to 100, your desired 120, 125 degrees. So that's a great way of increasing the energy volume of the tank without and living, you know, maybe living more comfortably with a 120-volt tank if you're putting heavier usage on it.
Hey, guys, just want to keep us moving. We've got other great questions. So Tony asked, is a
Thanks,
heat
guys.
pump, is a heat pump water heater more efficient than an electric on-demand heater?
Yeah,
Go
way
ahead.
more. Yeah, 4 or 5 times more at least. Yep.
But
Yeah,
it doesn't function all the time.
Yeah, electric, right. But when it's running, it's just a coefficient of performance of 1. So it is more efficient. However, that's
But
an
it's only
excellent
on, it's only on for 5 minutes versus a hot water heat pump that's on for all day long.
Heat pump, they don't run all day long. They just run for like an hour or two, maybe. You can look, I mean, you can collect some data. You can see my data, you know, basically a kilowatt hour a day, roughly.
Yeah, of course, if you have a tank gas water heater and you go to a heat pump water heater, those are big energy savings. If you have an on-demand gas and you go to a heat pump water heater, it's, you know, probably not as quite a big a jump in energy savings because the on-demand gas, of course, isn't on. It's only on when you use it. And similar to an electric
Huh?
on.
Mine's on-demand electric.
So is that supplying your shower or just a sink or the whole house?
The whole house.
Yeah, see, did you do that yourself or was that built in or how'd you?
We did it ourselves. We're all electric. We've got 28 solar panels. We've got a
Nice.
EV. We've got a hot tub and heat pump. Mr.
How-
Cool heat pump.
How many occupants in the house?
2.
Two. So yeah, you're electric on demand with all that solar and only 2 occupants. I think that was a good solution, right, Stu?
Yeah, that's a good solution. The problem with that for an average house is that's a really heavy power demand. It's like twin 40 amp breakers. That's more power than the vast majority of homes can accommodate without a major upgrade to their electric panel. I mean, good on you for having it. It's a great solution, but it's something that most homes just simply can't do.
Or a home that doesn't have solar supplementing, it probably wouldn't be the right decision.
Yeah, like to drive a shower where your gallon per minute is 2, 3, or 4, maybe even more gallon per minute flow rate. That takes a tremendous amount of, you know, sustained electrical power. So you know, that's really heavy wiring, really heavy circuit breakers. It's a lot of room on a panel. So I'm glad it works for you, but that's an option I'd love to recommend to everybody, but it's not a practical thing for most households.
Other questions? Other experiences that went well or less well?
I have one. We installed our own heat pump. We got 2 bids to have the heat pump installed, and it was $23,000 for both bids. So we thought, that's just incredible. It shouldn't cost that much for a heat pump. So we did it ourselves. It ended up costing us $6,500. We also employed the help of a refrigerant guy to charge our refrigerant lines and test the system, make sure there weren't any leaks. $700 well spent. So a heat pump for $6,500 is darn cheap, I'd say.
What kind of heat pump did you put in?
Mr. Cool.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's great. That's nice. Yeah, you're not the first. That's a great option. If you have any kind of skills at all, you can do that.
Yeah, we haven't burnt any wood the last 2 years since we've had our heat pump. So we're really happy with Mr. Cool. I know it's a do-it-yourself and it's not one you can work on, but it's working great for us.
That's great. My neighbor did a similar thing, and we definitely recommend that option to the DIYers out there.
Yep.
I really, unless someone has another question, I wanted to really quickly stress the importance of what Jim said in his slides about having your heat pump contractor look at your energy bills, because then they can see what your heat load is in December and January. And then the importance of a energy audit or a blower door number, because the example is on my home, and I'm going to talk in BTUs per hour. I had two furnaces, 80,000 BTUs each. So that's 160,000 BTUs. They looked at my energy bills. They said, your home only needs 50,000, not 160,000. And then I had an energy audit. My home is relatively tight. It was remodeled in 2006. They said, you don't need 160,000, you need 39,000. So that is a big difference. And they sized my heat pump accordingly, not oversized for my home, but they sized it accordingly to that 39,000 BTUs for heating.
And how were things when it was, when we had the Arctic vortex in your house, Dave?
Well, I had it installed in February, so I haven't had that quite yet, but we have another guide that we work with up in Lyons, and he's had his similar system installed for a couple years. And he has electric backup on his system, but he said, let's test this when it was 20 below zero last year and the year prior. We had a couple days there where it was below zero or 20 below zero at night. He turned off his electric coil and he said his house dropped from like 68 to 64 degrees. And then, of course, you know, the next day it might be negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but these heat pumps are rated much better than that. So he was quite comfortable. So I looking forward to this winter, trying, you know, testing it myself.
Julie,
Yeah, I am looking to install a heat pump and I've gotten 4 estimates so far, and like the gentleman said earlier on, each are wildly different. My main problem is that people want to send me a 5-ton heat pump when I think I just need a 3-ton. I found them today and calculated it myself for my house. So you know, it makes you not trust the contractors when you feel like they're trying to oversell you. So I'm not sure what advice you have. I mean, I haven't, some of them seem to, you know, measure each room and look at the windows and all that. So, but I'm not sure what calculation they were using to get me to 5 tons when I think I just need a 3-ton heat pump.
How many square feet is your house?
1,800.
Oh my, I'm sorry. Yeah, you probably need even less than, you should leave.
I mean, it is a 1896 house, so it's,
Oh,
it's old,
okay.
but we, you know, we've done the insulation and we've redone the windows and,
right.
you know, we've done a lot of stuff. So it just really, it's hard to trust people that are telling me I need a 5-ton heat pump
They're
when.
so used to oversizing gas furnaces, unfortunately. But like they should be talking in like half-ton increments. You know, they very rarely should jump from 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. If they're doing the calculations correctly, they should nudge you from 3.5 to 3 or from 3.5 to 4, not like not a full ton, but
Yeah.
So we can double check calculations too. If you have an energy audit, some numbers from that, and then you take some, especially window area, you know,
Yeah.
the basic internal area metrics of your house. If you give those to us, we have Tony Mitchell. He's runs our northern chapter. He's a building scientist, and he can do extraordinarily accurate heat load calculations just to kind of double check. But regardless of the age of your house, if it's been air sealed, insulated, if it has modern double pane windows on it, if it's got a modern envelope, then Dave and I talk about this all the time. It's roughly 1 to 1. So we'll round your 18 up to 2,000 square feet. When I see a house like that of any kind of modern construction, it's more like 2 to 2.5 tons.
Yeah.
So it would be really fun to get some accurate measurements in your house. But things surprise us sometimes. If you're on slab, we have a recent house our team was looking at. It's on slab, even though it's got modern doors, modern windows, modern walls, nowhere near as old as your house. It has a pretty high heat load on it because there's not much you can do with a slab.
Mhm.
Likewise, we recently had a house with a lot of glass. We've got a real architect on our team. He calls that big glass. It seems to be the vogue here in Boulder. Build something that kind of looks like a sunroom all around yourself. That's great, but that's really high energy demand. So
Is it true that being at altitude affects the manual J?
yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's going to decrease the efficiency. There's a factor to decrease you. How high up are you?
Oh, I mean, we're just in Denver, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Like 3 to 5% or something. But again, that'd be calculated in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
CCL, I know, has a time contract that they honor religiously, so I think I'll cut it off for now. I do want to make a quick pitch for Go Electric, though, as a sister organization to CCL. So there are 2.2 million homes in Colorado. That's a lot of decision makers that we need to educate as we try to reduce the carbon footprint of our state. So we need a lot of volunteers to help spread the word and doing things like this. And you don't have to be as smart as Stuart and Dave about the details of this stuff. And I'm a perfect example of that because they blow me away all the time. But there's a lot of opportunities for doing things like CCL does all the time, like tabling, public presentations, just explaining to people what a heat pump is in very simple terms can get people on the path. And one of the really interesting stats is that the best indicator of somebody who's about to install a heat pump is that their neighbor already did a heat pump. So getting the word out creates a multiplier effect. And then that will pull our contractors along and getting those who are laggards to get smarter about all this because they're going to start to see they're losing business. So any of you who want to go down this path, you can go to Go Electric Colorado and fill out our volunteer form. There is a free course that's available to become an electric coach through Rewiring America. So you can get up to speed to whatever degree that you want. And we got ways we can use you. So thank you. And it's all completely consistent with your CCL mission. You can wear both hats like I do.
Thanks, Jim.
Susan, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I love that pitch at the end. That's, thanks so much, Jim, for that, but also thanks to all of you for coming and presenting and answering questions. I mean, this was just fabulous. I think we all learned a lot. And so thanks again. And I guess we will circulate a link to the recording. And I think you mentioned that we could have the slides as well. We have several people who were not able to come tonight and would love to get those if you can share the slides as well as the record.
I'll send the slides to you, Susan, and then you can distribute them.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you again. This is wonderful. And, let's keep rolling, guys. So,
Thanks,
okay.
everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good rest of your evening, everyone.